Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
So the headline of your report is decriminalising the possession of cannabis.
We're saying it should no longer be a criminal offence to possess cannabis, but we're saying you should keep as criminal dealing in cannabis. We think the current law does not work to deter the use of cannabis, but everybody we spoke to who dealt with, as it were, the victims of cannabis use, people who have significant psychiatric problems, said don't make dealing legal, but they didn't all say do make it okay to have possession, but that was the view that we formed after looking at the law right across the world.
So let's break down some of those individual points. Obviously, in a lot of countries similar to the UK, like America, the full legalisation is quite widespread now.
Yes.
But you don't think that should happen?
I think that would be a bad idea. The effect of full legalisation in many states in the United States of America and in Canada has been that big commercial producers of cannabis come onto the market, and their job is inevitably to encourage more people to use cannabis, and people who do use cannabis to use it more. And although for 90% of people who use cannabis they don't have adverse effects, 10% do have adverse, often psychiatric effects, and you don't want to increase that. I don't want to replace big tobacco with big cannabis. So we were against legalisation, having seen its impacts across the world.
So just to dwell on that point for a moment, I mean, if you're saying 90% use it fine, 10% don't, I guess the ratio on alcohol would be probably worse than that, wouldn't it?
It might well be. It might well be.
So is that the implication is you wouldn't legalise alcohol if it was freshly discovered, or you haven't investigated that?
I haven't investigated that, but you're absolutely right to say alcohol has very, very severe adverse effects on some people. But we are where we are in relation to alcohol. And if you make a big change, for example, I mean, I'm not suggesting prohibition for one moment, but if one looked at where we would be at the beginning, I'm glad you're pleased. You've just got to take what you've got. And what we've got at the moment is it's a criminal to possess and it's criminal to deal. What's the right next step? And we strongly think the right next step is this fundamental reset whereby you legalise possession, but you keep criminal dealing. But you can do it very easily.
How big a difference would legalising possession have to the number of people that get arrested and possibly prosecuted currently?
The big area that would have a change would be stop and search. The biggest cause or justification given by the police, particularly in the big cities and particularly in London, is they stop and search people because of, quote, the smell of cannabis. If you made natural cannabis possession legal, it would take away one of the big reasons for stop and search. And that would be a good thing at the moment, because stop and search, particularly in London, is a source of real problems between the police and the community. It won't get rid of all the problems between the police and the black community, but it will have the effect of taking away what is an incredibly souring aspect of those relations.
And it is in particular the black community that tends to get stopped and searched under the guise of cannabis possession?
Yes. If you look at the figures, it is absolutely startling the much higher number of black, particularly young men, who are stopped for drugs, which almost invariably means the smell of cannabis, when there is absolutely no evidence at all that the black community uses cannabis more than any other community. And indeed, the evidence from all over the world is that cannabis is used very widely by every sort of community, whatever your colour.
A couple more quick questions. So how you said it's quite easy to make this change?
Yes, because the current position is the Misuse of Drugs Act criminalises cannabis. And I'm not talking about reclassifying from B to C. I'm talking about a statutory instrument that would take cannabis out of the Misuse of Drugs Act. And the consequence of that is it would fall under something called the Psychoactive Substances Act. And that would happen automatically. And the consequence of that act is it's criminal to deal, but it's not criminal to possess.
In terms of the medical use of cannabis,
yes,
again, something that has soared in the United States, for example.
Yeah.
Where are we on that? And does your report address any of the thoughts about that?
It does. There are genuinely some people who get real, particular assuaging of pain by the use of cannabis. It's very difficult to get cannabis legally, although it's allowed, but it's only allowed in practice through private medical practitioners. We call for more research and for the health service to look at the question of how they could make that essentially elite entitlement to medical cannabis more available to all, but subject to safeguards.
I guess my final question on all of this, and I guess I could probably guess what your response is going to be, because you already mentioned the point of it's important to take note of where we are as it relates to, say, alcohol versus cannabis. But how important is it as a general deterrent to something that on the surface isn't good for your health in the same way that alcohol isn't, to keep something illegal, and that switching that would act as a sort of massive advertising moment for many people who might have decided not to use it, to think, oh, it is okay because the government says it's okay?
That's the very question we've been focused on. That's why we think it's right to criminalise dealing, but not criminalise possession, because the consequences of criminalising possession has been no deterrent. It's 2.5 million people have used cannabis probably this year, so it's not deterring people from using it. But by keeping it criminal in dealing, you send the message the government does not approve of that.
Very, very interesting. Lord Flaconer, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Good to see you.